Everyone, and welcome to my channel. So in today's video I wanted to say hello to the camera bear. That's my bear, just put. Yeah, so in today's video I just wanted to go through another article which a little bit distracting because there's people out there and it's kind of messing up my head because they're doing scaffolding and it's kind of stressing me out, so bear with me if I'm a little bit incoherent. We'll try. My brain, it's annoying. Yes, go outside, they're not noticing me, it's fine. You know how the brain is, it kind of messes you up even though you don't want it to, and it's really frustrating. That's what anxiety is anyway, yeah. Stressful, right, let's try. Okay, so what I'm saying is today, I want to go through an article which I found. It's NCB on pmc.ncbi.nlm.nih.gov, and it's called The First 5 Minutes Initial Impressions During ASD Diagnostic Evaluations in Young Children. I just came across this article and read it, and I just thought it was quite interesting. So I just wanted to go through the main sort of points from the article that I made a note of, and then I can talk more maybe about my own sort of thoughts, really. So bear with me if I get a bit distracted. I'm trying my hardest. It's just there's noises outside. Yeah, it's annoying. Okay, I'm trying my hardest. Keep getting distracted though, it's annoying. Okay. So after so as I say, the first 5 minutes initial impressions during ASD diagnostic evaluations in young children. So annoying, get distracted. Yeah, that's what ADHD is like. I'm being autistic. You keep getting distracted by noises. I hate it. It's because there's noises outside. And it's annoying, and I really want to try and not be distracted because I hate it and I just want to be a normal person. So let's try again. Okay, so really distracting. So basically in this article the idea is that some kids, I presume this also applies to adults as well, that some children display really like obvious classic, if you like, classic in inverted commas, frank is the other word for that, manifestation of autism, which can be picked up, like say within 5 minutes, in like a very sort of brief interaction with, say, an expert assessor. They didn't say whether this also applies to non-experts, like say sort of lay people who aren't familiar, who you don't have great expertise in autism, like just like your average person off the street. They didn't. It didn't say whether it also applied to them. This was just connected to expert assessors. That expert assessors can, in some cases, identify autism in as little as 5 minutes, and they can kind of just say, yep, that child is autistic. They haven't yet carried out any assessment. They haven't yet gone and done all of the like evidence-based work of carer reports or paediatrician reports or any of that. They haven't done that yet. This is just a snap judgment, 5 minutes, sort of using their pattern detection skills, on the spot kind of spontaneous judgment. That child's autistic. They can tell just like 5 minutes. And this is known as frank ASD. Frank because the manifestation is transparent, like pretty much straight away. Also known like as classic. The symptoms are just very in your face. So after 5 minutes observing each child, clinicians recorded if they thought the child would meet the criteria for ASD following a complete evaluation, and recorded their confidence in this impression. The clinician's initial impressions matched the final diagnosis in 81% of cases. 92% of cases initially thought to have ASD met the criteria following the full evaluation. So in other words, the vast majority of those kind of frank ASD presentations where the clinician made a snap assessment judgment in 5 minutes, yeah, that child's autistic. The vast majority of those did turn out to be autistic after a proper full evaluation, once they went through the full diagnosis process, showing a very, very, very high connection between an assessor's initial verdict and the later assessment, the later diagnosis in those children. So in other words, you can safely say that if, say, an expert clinician says that child's autistic in as little as 5 minutes before carrying out the evaluation, 9 times out of 10, that child will come out with an autism diagnosis. There will still be a few children who don't, but the vast majority will. And that suggests there is something going on there where there are some very kind of clear kind of autism features in some kids, and presumably adults too, which are kind of unmistakable. Almost like you could see the autism. It's like, yeah, it's transparent, it's obvious, it's not invisible, in other words. But 24% of cases initially thought not to have ASD also met the criteria, suggesting a high miss rate. So that's interesting. So that shows that a significant minority of children who in those 5 minutes the clinicians like, no, they don't have ASD, a significant minority actually turned out to have ASD, which shows that this isn't always accurate. And in other words, sometimes someone might think someone doesn't have it, a child might not have it, before they've carried out full assessment, and it's not always correct. And that shows how it's important that that for these children to still be assessed, because because you don't want to miss them, and it was saying this shows how important it is to not just rely on like behaviour, like surface impressions, but to get other evidence as well, because otherwise you could end up with false negatives. So the study found that clinicians cannot easily rule out autism. They're far better at ruling in autism in those frank ASD cases, but they were not so good at ruling out autism. And this is in highly experienced clinicians here. This is highly experienced. We're not just talking about, people without experience. These are people who are extremely experienced, and yet even these people are sometimes missing some cases, or, in the initial assessment, not so much in diagnosis. It's talking here about, the initial kind of screening. Some of them aren't necessarily picking up in that short space of time, but will later pick it up if they do a thorough assessment in some cases. So many children who initially appeared not to have autism were ultimately diagnosed. But the experts were generally accurate ruling in autism. When a child appeared to have autism within 5 minutes, they were almost always so diagnosed later when they've had the full assessment. The data also indicates a significant lag between initial parent concerns and ASD diagnosis. That can be sometimes over years between, when a parent first has concerns and when a child is diagnosed, can take a very long time. In addition to rigorous evaluation of assessment data, clinicians also rely on clinical judgment, and this is strengthened with experience. So the clinical judgment aspect is to do with, they have to synthesise all the data and their own kind of, their own judgment based on the person's behaviour and all of these things, and the fact that they've seen so many people with autism over such a long period of time. Experienced clinicians are much better at kind of just sensing autism. They have a sort of sense for autism, which, say, a less experienced clinician might not have. So a less experienced clinician might rely more on, a tick box exercise, because they're not so experienced at sensing autism, whereas a clinician has a lot of experience. They've seen loads and loads of autistic people, so they know what to look for. They can often pick up really subtle signals that maybe someone else doesn't pick up, really subtle stuff. But it says that with regards to the frank cases, those are really obvious, some individuals can be differentiated from so-called neurotypical individuals even by non-experts. I'm pretty certain I was when I was a kid, but I know I was because, as I said, I have mentioned this before in my other videos about that woman at a cafe who just said she always thought I was, and she wasn't even an expert. She must have picked up something about me when I was a kid. So, yeah. And I've had a few other people passing not quite so blatant comments, but I have had other people kind of like alluding to me not being quite typical. So I suspect that, I know that for a fact that as a kid at least that was the case. I'm not sure it's quite so much the case as an adult. I think I'm far more subtle in presentation now, but you do change as you get older. But actually, I don't actually know. I'd have to go and ask loads of people, and that'd be quite an interesting experiment. Not that I actually know that many people, but it'd be interesting. Apparently even naive waiters can reliably differentiate ASD using gestalt judgments such as awkwardness, approachability, eye contact, likelihood of friendship, that sort of thing. So they might not necessarily know it's autism because you'd have to have some understanding of autism, but even naive raters, so inexperienced people, can often just tell that an autistic person is different from a non-autistic person, even if they're not picking up on the autism itself. Okay, I'm just going to move over to video number 2 now to carry on talking about this article. I'll probably have to come back and do more videos on this one as well.